They say a dry river has a throat. Most days it stays quiet, cracks in the clay opening and closing without a sound. On certain nights, when the wind comes long across the plains and the sky lines close enough to see its own reflection in the dust, something clears its throat and speaks. People who know this country do not stand at the lip of that voice and listen. At first light, a truck crept along a washboard track and stopped a respectful distance from a derelict shack. A low ridge of red earth sloped into a wide ribbon of nothing, that long scar where a river used to run. Spinifex punctured the bed like old stitches. The shack sat near the bend, its timber roof bowed, its walls the color of dried blood and salt. In this light it seemed smaller, as if night had been the author of its size. A ranger climbed down and closed the door with the care of a man who listens to how hinges speak. He walked to the riverbed's lip and laid a palm on the clay. The cold under it belonged to old Shadow, not morning. He had done this before. 3 steps back, no words, the wind lifting and falling. For a heartbeat, the sound it made was not wind. It was a trickle, a small, patient pouring into a place that could not hold it. He set a bottle of water on the edge and a folded square of shade cloth held by a stone. No note. Notes are for people. Out here, other mouths do the reading. What the land keeps, it keeps. He stepped back to the truck and, without looking over his shoulder, drove away. In the rear view, the shack flickered once like a lantern catching. The day before, long before the ranger's shade cloth found its shape under a stone, a group of travelers left the bitumen for the kind of road that breathes. The ute rattled like a drawer with old cutlery. They stopped at the last roadhouse with fuel cold enough to drink without hallucinating, and a ceiling fan that already knew today's news and had chosen not to care. Behind the counter stood a woman whose presence made the fluorescent lights less impatient. The town called her Auntie, whether she was theirs or not. She watched the 4 of them with a seriousness that wasn't unkind. Ava did most of the talking. Hydrology had claimed her early, not the blue water of dams and swimming pools, but the thin, elegant story of water moving through dust. She stood with the resolve of someone who had listened to too many pipes and wanted to know what it sounded like when water ran where pipes never were. She believed that if she was careful and asked nicely, country would allow her to look. Nate had learned the rhythm of rooms. Once a journalist, now a photographer, he held a camera like a small animal that sometimes bit. He believed an empty river could speak louder than any press conference if the light was right and the story had an unanswerable question. Marley drove, a stocky man with sun in his shoulders, whose father had taught him to call the land by its first name and leave the rest alone. Not a traditional owner, and knew the difference. Respect was his habit. Layla moved like someone who had slept too many nights at a bedside. A nurse long enough to have grown a second heart for triage, she came for quiet and to watch a friend do the thing that made her feel necessary. Auntie watched Ava refill water, Marley count fuel, Nate arrange packets as if they were props he hadn't decided to admit yet, Layla check bandages though nobody was bleeding. She rubbed the counter with a cloth that had outlived fashions. "You heading west?" she asked. "A weather report, not a challenge." "Northwest," Ava said. "Dry riverbed near Watalinya Station. Old meander, we'll be careful." "People don't get to be careful out there," Auntie said. "They get to be guests. If country wants you to sit, you sit. If it wants you to go, you don't argue. We're after evidence of recent flows," Ava said, optimism tucked inside data. "Acoustic sensors, thermal, there are rumors about hearing water." "Rivers talk when they feel like it," Auntie said, "not always to us. And there's a shack by that dry bend you're pointing at, been empty longer than I've been here." At night you'll see light in there if you look. Don't look. If you hear water where there isn't any, don't chase it. If a house asks your name, don't give it. Houses should keep weather out, not lives in. Some houses forget. Marley nodded like a man mapping a pre-existing fence line. We'll camp on the ridge, not in the bed. That's a start, Auntie said. Leave water and shade on the edge when you go. Don't take anything. Don't put laughter where it doesn't belong. Not all ghosts are sad, some are busy. You don't want to get in their way. It's just a story, Nate said, as if stories hadn't started wars. Auntie's mouth did a small thing that could pass for a smile if you didn't have the right glasses on. Sometimes the land tells you a story, she said. Sometimes it tells one about you. Know which is which. They left with the fan counting seconds and the ceiling still unconvinced. The bitumen gave up in the honest way bitumen does. The road became ribs and then a suggestion. The sun slid sideways and pinned the color out of shrubs. They drove beside a wire fence that had lost the fight with itself and stopped when Marley lifted his hand. The riverbed appeared without water the way a family appears without one person, everyone arranged politely to hide the gap. Wide, flat, curved because curves are the kindest way to go home. On the inside bend, near a bank of white clay that still wore the memory of toads, sat the shack. In daylight it looked like a place that had been useful to someone with a dog and a series of good intentions. The door hung wonky. The corrugated roof whispered in small gusts like it had once been built by someone who knew which way rain ran. They unloaded without ceremony and built a small camp on the rise. The ground was stubborn with grass and studded with stones carrying heat like old grudges. The riverbed below was powder that would forget how to come down if you threw it up. Ava set a small tripod with a directional mic and a thermal camera, as if laying breadcrumbs for something that didn't need help finding them. Looks less cursed in daylight, Nate said, which works until it doesn't. Don't say that word, Marley said mildly. Don't call anything what it hasn't called itself. That's asking for a conversation you can't finish. Layla squinted into the white. It's so quiet, she said, her voice doing that instinctive softening people use in sick rooms. Feels like a waiting room. They studied the shack from Auntie's distance. Boards over the window had fallen inward and made a mouth. No footprints led to the door. Birds came and went like there was no news. They waited for evening because humans can't help themselves. At dusk, air cooled because the sun's punctuality demands it. The sky moved through old blues to a tone. The shack seemed to lean forward almost imperceptibly, like a man with his hand behind his ear. They were eating in that low, practical way people eat when food is fuel and the world wants to see if you're paying attention when the sound came. Not wind. The small perfect sound a tap makes when a child leaves it on just enough for a parent to notice. From the bed's middle, it traveled through dust the way rumor travels through families. Layla set her spoon down. Do you hear? Yeah, Marley said. Too flat to be casual. Ava stood on an old tree root as if height could help her weigh the sound. Under the trickle was another noise, lower and longer, breath through reed. The skin between her eyes remembered being 7 under blankets listening to blood choose her over the dark. She opened her eyes. The shack had a light in it. Ask the air, it would say lantern. Ask the house, it might say memory. Okay, Nate said, bravado and question. Do not go, Marley said, his hand steady enough to be trusted. We came to record it, Ava said, an apology to Auntie and to herself. I'll point the mic and stay on the ridge. Point away. Stay. She planted the tripod and watched the meter climb, one eye on the shack. The light made no sense. Soft, breathing, not torch, not electric. She let her ear do the seeing. The trickle found pattern. Water fell in a cadence the body owns. The rhythm said Ava. She went still. Nate's head turned and kept going because his neck realized before his pride. "It said something," he said. His voice pitched for a joke and failed. "It's a trick," Ava said, mouth caught between scientist and child. Inside the shack, something tapped a slow rhythm. 3 taps, a pause, 2 taps, not code, not. The light brightened, then dimmed like breath. The walls looked thin. "Stay here," Nate said, and started down. Marley caught his sleeve with 2 fingers. "Do not answer a place with your feet. I'm just getting nearer for audio," Nate said, a man negotiating with himself. Layla put her body between Nate and the slope the way a hand goes out when the car brakes. "He said stay," she said, her voice calm and steel. The trickle paused like a mind changing itself and returned louder. Ava watched the meter and the bed considering weight. "We get the recording and we go," she said. "No shack." Every time humans make a plan like that, the story smiles without a mouth. The light didn't increase. It refused to behave like intention. The tapping stopped. The bed sounded exactly like a riverbed shouldn't. The night lined in. They waited long enough for hearts to settle. Nate lifted the camera and set it down. Layla kept sitting, which can be salvation. Marley watched a slow star that was too lazy for satellites and too straight for planes. The first voice came from the wall nearest the door. It was the voice you use in houses at midnight when you don't want to wake anyone. At first the mouth of it was the light flame between timber ribs, then the beams joined the way some wood sings when wind insists. The sound came through the wall like rain through tin and changed nothing. It spoke a single word in a tone not usually used for words. Ava. It didn't shout or plead. It invited, not to a party, but to a remembered room. Ava stepped back as if the ground had moved forward. "Don't," Layla said, "a leash you choose because you love the dog." Nate swallowed. Tonight he found himself in the first honest argument he'd had with the truth in years. Marley didn't move. "Auntie said," he reminded them. Along a horizontal beam, a damp patch grew in the shape of a hand, then faded. Too far for warmth. It came and went like something thinking about touching and deciding to behave. Water sounds persisted under the voice, generous, offering, the kind of tap parents leave running so the bath doesn't shock a small chest. "It didn't just say your name," Nate said quietly, eyes on the boards. "It said mine, then a name I haven't heard out loud in 10 years. "Don't say it back," Marley said, and the wind caught the "we" in his voice before he could tuck it away. The light pulsed once, lantern memory that lives in wrists. The trickle moved 2 meters left and felt closer. Ava pivoted the microphone instead of her feet. The meter smiled and showed teeth. "Why does the water sound like that?" Layla asked, naming the wrong thing as distance. "It's not on the surface, it's in the dust." "Capillary action," Ava said, reflex and refuge. "Grains vibrating, it's memory." "Memory that can make a light," Nate said. "Lots of things make lights in old houses," Ava said. "Like houses," Marley offered. Ava nodded as if certainty could shine to morning. "We record an hour and leave. We don't go near it." They recorded sediment singing and invented small talk to keep the presence from believing itself the only voice. The light stayed lungs. The night settled like a patient dog with its head on its paws. When they turned to pack, the light went out. The trickle shifted not in pitch but in location, 2 meters closer at the foot of the bank. And then the sound did something none of them were built to forgive quickly. It matched their breaths, 4 inhales, 4 exhales. Ava put her hand over her mouth like a child at assembly. Layla matched the trickle and slowed it on purpose. Marley looked up at stars that had never learned to count in human. "Get in," he said. "We go." They moved toward the ute as if the opposite of running could still be fast. Nate reached for the passenger door and found nothing. He could see it. His hand passed an inch to the right of where it ought to be. He adjusted and found air where hinge should be. He slid and felt metal. Rules bent, the handle gave. Layla buckled her belt like a superstition. Ava placed the mic carefully because carefulness keeps you human. Marley turned the key. The ute tried to exist in 2 moods at once, one where engines obey, one where they decide not to. A small cough, a series of checks, the bonnet's sincerity, "I'm fine." The trickle widened, as if someone opened a small valve and then another. Wind braided into it, and whatever low instrument the night likes to keep hidden. From the shack came a very gentle knocking, the kind you make as a courtesy in a place you already live. A voice slid into the cab through the open window. It wore the tone of radio doing both sides of a conversation. "Station, we are at the bend. No flow on surface. Repeat, no flow." Clipped, careful, 1976 and yesterday. Marley lifted 2 fingers toward the dash, then lowered them. No one reached for the radio. Old things take more than hands. "Station, copy, don't go in the house. Leave water and come home." A woman's voice with tired bones. She didn't say please, she didn't need to. Static moved with the quality of breath. "Reasons you don't go inside," Layla said, listing the way list save. "Snakes, structure unsound, mold an invitation." Nate pointed the camera without looking through it and took a picture that would later look like an idea. "We did not go inside," he said, to the radio, to Auntie, to himself. "Not yet," the house said, through its roof. "Get out," Marley said to the ute under his breath, the gentleness you use with a thing that has carried you. "Please." He turned the key. The engine arrived obediently. They drove up the bank the way you take steps measured wrong. The bed fell away. The trickle moved back to where it had begun, sound recalculating. The light puffed once like a happy smoker. On the crest they parked and spoke the language with sentences and rules that keeps us in rooms. "Camp here," Ava said. "Leave at first light." "On the ridge," Marley said, disagreeing without saying no. They pitched a small, mean tent on the stony rise, a discipline worth practicing. No fire, heat carries conversation too well. Nate set the camera to watch the slope. The night put a hand over their camp and stroked it gently to see if hair would rise. From the shack came a small, ordinary sound, the hush and sigh of a door opening and closing. No footsteps, no hinge complaint. Nate adjusted the camera like an apology and looked with his eyes too. "Do not answer with your body," Marley said. Ava nodded. She took the field notebook and wrote as if writing made a wall around breath. Sound mapping at Watalinya Dry Bend, old shack visible. Auditory, running water where no flow present. Photographic, internal light. Advisory, leave water, shade on departure. Rule, if asked for name, do not give. She underlined the last sentence twice. The shack did not sleep. Night carries memory to every beam and nail. Somewhere in the little square room, a lantern burned the way lights burn in places that are empty and then aren't. Voices came now not in words, but in how they held breath between them. Conversations happened in that house in 1953, 1978, 1999, last summer, and none had found an ending in time. The beams carried the habit of speech. The walls learned to repeat without malice. The river under everything made the sound it had made when it ran with fish and birds and children and sudden lean deaths. The house held that sound and gave it back like a flute gives breath back as song. Past midnight, Nate stood because sitting had stopped being a compromise and had begun being surrender. He kept the camera low. The lens stayed blind. He walked to the edge of their little discipline and waited the way you wait for a kettle. Layla said his name once in the tone that means I am awake if you need rescuing, and that rescue will be quiet. A hush bled out of the house and along the bed and up the slope and around Nate's boots. Water under dust talked. It said Nate, an ordinary name until a place says it. His mouth made a shape and his throat made a noise that refused to be language. He pinned it there. It knows you, Ava said, because naming the obvious sometimes helps with small fears. It didn't help with the big kind. You don't have to be known to be kept, Marley said. He put a hand on Nate's shoulder with the particular forgiveness you offer to people who nearly outlived themselves. Come away. Nate came away. He sat, head in hands. The picture of a journalist cried in the dark where no one was keeping score. Layla set a hand between his shoulder blades and let weight do the work care sometimes needs. Ava breathed like a kid told to match the metronome. The radio clicked once. A voice spoke that didn't belong to anyone they knew and still belonged more than any they would hear again. In perfect, ordinary diction, don't sleep with your mouth open where old houses can see your teeth. They laughed, the wrong tension breaking into the right kind of relief for a quarter minute. The house laughed back without sound at all, and the river rumbled with a tone you call amused if land could be. Bodies will sleep even when stories disapprove. They slept a little. Ava woke first, jolted out of a dream of a flood that knew exactly where to stop. The hand found the notebook in the dark. The pen knew the margins. She wrote, "If we go in, we are in." The sound again. Water moving under dust, patient, busy. The lantern brightened twice, as if a name had been announced, then steadied. The door did its soft courtesy. A shape passed across the interior wall, not shadow, not light, but suggestion. Nate stood before deciding too. Layla stood with him. Marley set his feet before sitting up, because sometimes feet on ground convinces your bones you have enough. A whisper arrived across the bed, not through air, but through whatever carries memories with nowhere else to rest. It said a name none of them had. They knew it anyway, the way you know the outline of a chair you stub your toe on and then tape. It said Charlie. Then 3 other names, one a woman's, one indigenous, one a nickname without vowels. If you were from here, they'd roll through you like an old headline that still teaches something. "Missing persons," Nate said, his voice the undersound of a wire. "SHH," Layla said, her hand a breath above his sleeve. "Don't give them a list to become." Ava had already decided. She took the bottle of water, the folded shade cloth, and a small tin with a pencil glinting in dawn. She walked to the slope's edge with the deliberateness of someone about to step into a room not theirs and leave a minute later. She set the water and shade and wedged the tin under a rock. Inside, a note in a steady hand. "We are guests. We will leave in the morning. We will not go inside. We will not speak our names. We leave this water and shade in thanks. If anyone else comes, we ask you to let them go. Country doesn't read. It remembers. Sometimes the two aren't very different." The tin sat like a small creature hiding from a hawk. The shade remained shade. The water cast an honest shadow. The radio again, an old man's reserved authority. "If you are at the dry river shack at Watalinya Bend, do not enter. Leave water and shade and go home. Do not follow voices. Do not give names. If the house asks you to set the table, you say, "Not today, auntie." If the river says you owe, you say, "I have coin and breath, but no name for you." "Who is that?" Nate whispered. No one answered. He was someone who had already not left this place and also left it too many times. "Pack," Marley said. "We go." The ute turned over with the relief mechanical things feel when people stop asking miracles for free. They loaded quickly and quiet. The trickle followed. The lantern dimmed as if placed under a hand. The door did its courtesy knock, once, twice, 3 times, like goodbye or being certain. They started along the ridge. For 20 meters the road was a road, the bed was a bed that had forgotten water. Then the world did what it does when the story has decided. It moved without moving. The ute rolled up a slope that felt like going down. The bed shifted a half-meter left and said so without dust. The ridge was the ridge and also wasn't. Marley kept the wheel steady, everything in his body saying yes to forward. 50 meters later the trees said, "The shack is to your right." It was. "Do not argue with country," Marley said aloud, as if words could remind bones of instructions given before they were born. He turned left where nothing should have been and found an older track that had. Half-buried bottles lined it, learning to be glass and sand at once. The shack was behind them and in front of them. The trickle sounded older. In one patch, morning was noon. In another, dawn lingered. Birds started, stopped, edited. "I'm going to be sick," Nate said calmly, then was. "Head down, hands up. The wrong move in cars, the right one for shame." "Eyes on me," Layla said, the clinic voice that can be trusted even when it hurts. "Just me." "This is a throat," Ava said through teeth turned honest. "The house is over the river's throat. It's using us to swallow its sound, playing us back to ourselves." "It wants names," Marley said, a muscle jumping in his cheek like someone had asked to borrow his and go into town. They turned again onto a track that didn't believe in them. The shack slid behind Mally like a bad thought behind a good one. The trickle kept doing its work. The radio whispered in a voice that could have belonged to any of them, 30 years older, harder. "Don't pay with names, pay with breath and the smallest possible kindness." At the fence line where the track climbed to highway, Layla set another bottle and a folded square of shade cloth, a ridiculous altar at a sensible place. "We are leaving you offerings," she said to whatever keeps ledgers this far west. "We are not coming in." They drove until the ridge learned to be polite again. They took a turn that wasn't like the one last time and exactly like the one their bodies expected. The shack sat in front of them once more, like your grandfather's chair at the bottom of the pool, still helping a child climb out. "Okay," Marley said, the kind you use when there's a job and your hands will take their pay later. "On foot to the flat rock. We do not stop. We do not listen. We keep each other's sleeves. No one says any name, not old names, not pet names, not made-up ones, not even the names you call yourself when you've done a dumb thing." They walked like a small unit. Ava kept the notebook and pen in one hand, ritual that had saved her mind in rooms where bodies were allowed only if they didn't disturb the furniture. Layla held Nate's sleeve with a kindness that didn't require him to be strong enough to ask. Marley faced the track like his own door at night. The first voice, Cousin Close, came on the left. Someone Marley had learned to miss without resentment. It said a childhood name that wasn't his legal one and meant love. He didn't blink. The second came from the right with a laugh that had been expensive for Ava to remember. She breathed through her nose and didn't spend her breath. The third came straight ahead with bland pleasantness. "Let me see your passport." Nate barked one small, angry laugh and shrugged so it fell off. They stepped over it. They climbed. The shack moved behind, alongside, then not at all. The track learned their feet and let them go. The trickle softened, not in volume, but in hard edges, more like breath. The sun agreed on mid-morning everywhere at once. It was enough. On a slab of flat rock gray with the memory of 1,000,000 suns, lines had been scratched long ago, lines first, meanings afterward. If you'd been invited to look and learned, you'd know. They stood on the far side. They had not been invited. "Here," Marley said, stopping like a man at a church door, whether he believes or not. "We wait. We were given a track. We will be given another." They waited. Country considered their kindnesses, and their broken ones weighed them like old coins. The trickle carried on, stubborn as ever. The light flickered once, as if thinking better of sassing an elder, and went out. "Look," Layla said gently. A small movement in the riverbed rippled the dust's skin, out where no person stood and no bird willed it, running from the shack's door to the place where a river had once dropped its shoulder and slowed. Not water, worse and better. The story of water told back to itself. "Don't take it," Ava said, to whomever needed hearing. A long minute later, someone else looked at them from a long way away, not visible, known. It breathed once through all their mouths and left. The house became timber. The radio in the ute went politely dead. Wind became wind again. They left. At the roadhouse, the ceiling fan's democracy continued. Auntie looked up like she had expected them yesterday and also knew better. She took their fuel money the way an altar takes candles. She folded a cloth and wiped where elbows had leaned, cleaning off the fingerprint of what had almost come back with them. "Left water?" she asked. "Yes," Layla said. "And shade," Ava added, "because small good things want witnesses." "Good," Auntie said. "If you hear running water at night here this week, leave the taps alone and sleep anyway. It'll be yarning to itself." Nate reached into his bag like his fingers were going to bring out proof and found a cheap blue pen cracked from yesterday. He set it down, slid it back, a man catching himself stealing when no one is looking. "I heard my brother," he said. Words meant more for his own throat than any ear. Auntie considered him the way you consider weather. You don't wish it away, you make tea and wait. "Rivers got ears," she said. "Houses get ears if you ask them to listen all the time. Not everything that speaks wants an answer. Not everything that listens should be fed." "Will it?" Ava began, then remembered how to end a sentence when the next words don't belong to her. "Shacks that sit on throats," Auntie said, catching the piece, "do what they're for. They hold older voices, sometimes newer ones. I'm not your law out there, love. But don't go back without the ones who get to decide these things, and even then maybe still don't." "What about the people who—" Nate didn't finish either. "You know we don't say names to certain things," Auntie said. "I'll say this. If anyone you love went near there hungry for water or stories or money and didn't come home, we set food and shade where their feet went last. Sometimes that's how love works. We set a table where hunger ends." They drove to the ranger station. Paperwork wanted words. They gave it words. The ranger wrote, filed, looked out at scrub, and did not call what was out there by any name the forms could hold. Weeks later, a drone pilot posted footage on a forum kind people don't spend time on. 2 minutes. White riverbed. Small house flickering like a man remembering a speech. The drone hovered without thinking. Comments filled with idiots and fewer, better voices. In one frame, if your eye likes faces in clouds and knots of wood, you could swear a ripple moved across dust as if someone ran baby fingers along the surface and liked the feel. The ranger watched it twice and didn't write back. Occasionally a ute slows on that ridge. The driver sets a bottle of water with the label peeled off and a folded square of shade cloth where tire marks turn toward the bend. They don't go closer. They don't look to see if the house lights itself the way blood makes light inside a cut. A hand lays flat on the hood like you do when you want a good thing to keep doing its job. They sit a minute, not to listen, but to leave space where listening could happen if needed. Then they drive. If you are out there on a night with patient stars and you hear, long across the empty, water moving through dust, it helps to know a few things. Dry rivers don't forget. Houses near them that learn to hold sound don't lose the habit. Not all voices are for us. If a place that is empty asks you to keep it company, you can leave a gift and walk anyway. If it knows your name, and it will because names sweat out of us, you don't owe it the rest of the word. You owe respect. Pay with breath if you must. Leave water and shade. Wait for the first bird, then go. Sometimes I think about the shack at the dry bend and the light it makes when no one feeds it. Not because I want to sit there, because the world is full of rooms that ask your name before you've learned to keep it. Not because a note and a square of cloth save a life, because the land will keep what it keeps. The rest of us are guests. And some nights, when the ceiling sounds wrong and I feel a trickle move where there is only floor, I practice with my mouth closed and my heart open the oldest rule anyone in a kind room ever gave me. If something in the dark asks who you are, you can say, "Not tonight, old house. Not tonight, old river. Not today, auntie." Then you breathe and you leave. And maybe, when the fan turns and the light is honest, you put water and shade where a footstep ended, and don't look back to see if a lantern in a little box of timber remembers your manners.